Is Warframe easier solo? The short answer is it depends. The long answer recognises that the question is as much a question of the definition of easier as it is the actual question itself. Let's break that down and see why solo wins or loses in those different ways. I'm TheKengineer, let's solve a practical problem. There's so many ways to interpret easy. Actually, to be certain, I looked up the definition of the word easy as if English wasn't my first and only language. Yet boy howdy, are there a lot of ways to be easy. Just in adjectives alone, the Oxford English Dictionary lists 17 articles of interpretations, and that's before touching on the adverb, interjection, and noun sections. But to simplify, there is easy as in it takes little effort, easy as in it takes little consideration, easy as in it is lenient and forgiving, easy as in suggestible or agreeable, easy as in pleasant to behold, and finally easy as in earnestly available. But I'll leave that to those players who particularly covet the heirloom skins. From the top then, does Warframe take less effort solo? Broadly, having someone else in missions means you've got someone else the enemies need to be shooting at, and that someone can also be doing their own shooting or supporting of the mission. With you no longer needing to cover the whole mission by yourself, it naturally would seem to take less effort. Except, this only holds true for the intuitive consequences of having someone else in your mission. Missions with more players in will have enhanced objectives to counteract the increased power on your side. Survival missions have more enemies spawning, interception missions capture points more slowly per player, while Void Flood missions fill your reservoir more slowly on collecting Vitablast. Only a handful of missions don't have a significant uptick in effort required from the team as a whole, such as capture missions still only having one target, and spy missions still having 3 vaults. Most of the time, you either have more concurrent and total enemies to defend against, or each person's contribution to the objective is reduced. On reaching Seal Path, this changes slightly. The enemy spawns become locked to acting like there are 4 players in the mission at all times, but objective contribution remains scaled to player count. This means that missions like survival and defense become more difficult with fewer players as the same number of enemies are threatening the mission. However, missions like interception and alchemy can still be completed quite readily by a solo player as the capture speed of the interception point, or progress made per amphor, still increases with fewer players in squad. By far the biggest impact on effort though is on loot acquisition. Regardless of a mission being easier with fewer enemy spawns and higher objective progress per action, fewer enemies to kill and fewer kills per minute will reduce the resources you gain. Solo missions, which are necessarily slower like spy missions, or at the very least harder to do as quickly solo like with disruption, will mean you're spending at least as much effort over a longer time for the same rewards. Still, in almost every case of mission scaling to accommodate more players in the squad, the scaling is not linear. Each player will have less they individually need to achieve, on average, for mission success. No matter how you shake it that way, the mission will take the same or less effort in a team than it does solo. There are 2 exceptions. First is bad teammates. If you're the only one capturing interception points, chucking amphors, completing spy vaults on a sortie without setting off the alarms, then at that point the other players just aren't pulling their weight. Any scaling modifiers are working against you, and any difficulty or failure conditions are more likely to be triggered. Second exception is defense. Defense missions are unlike most missions in that the number of enemies to kill dictates your actual progress. There's no endless spawns like with survival and mobile defense on a timer, nor is the progress tied to a kill adjacent or entirely no kill condition like excavation progress and spy vaults. Defense spawns a relatively static number of enemies for a given mission and wave combination, and denies progress until all of those enemies are dealt with. Solo not only has fewer enemies to kill, outside of Steel Path, but also can spawn a greater fraction of those enemies simultaneously. In testing with a solo, duo, trio, and full squad on Saturn's Helene, I found that regardless of the amount of effort being put in by the extra players, we simply could not complete the mission faster than if it was done solo. The total number of enemies per wave increased, but not linearly, yet the max number of simultaneously spawned enemies didn't scale to match. We were quite literally limited by how fast the enemies could live, rather than how fast they could die. This spawning quirk doesn't really affect most other missions. It only applies when you're able to nuke a limitless number of enemies on a wave-based objective pretty much as fast as they're able to spawn with no change in effort. Only then does solo actually reduce the effort to complete rotations because of the mission scaling running up against spawn caps. So in terms of effort, Warframe is usually easier in a group so long as the group is on your level. What about in terms of consideration? That is, how much more or less do you have to care or be anxious solo? When you're in a team, especially a public squad, there are unspoken expectations. You're somewhat expected to be running the main mission objective. You're somewhat expected to keep up with others' pace. If you dawdle around in a relic fisher, not picking up reactant, or split off from a survival mission and break up the spawns, you'll inevitably draw ire from your fellow players. This places expectations and demands on you, requiring you to care more about the way you play the game if you want to be a good teammate. I'm just going to have to pretend like you want to be a good teammate if you're watching this. On the other hand, solo has no such demands and expectations on you. You can speedrun without upsetting someone who's not as fast. You can explore and roam without upsetting someone trying to farm quickly. You can wander to any part of a survival map freely, saunter through spy vaults to cautiously learn them, and otherwise do things your way. In this way, the mission is easygoing. That is until you get to arbitrations and Archimedia. All the carefree attitude vanishes in those missions, unless you're well overgeared for a single crucial reason. Dying once will fail the mission. No revives, no second chances, you lose. Due to their very nature as challenge missions, ones which allow allies to pick you up where you fall, this flips the script and ramps up the anxiety when solo. So most of the time, Warframe allows you to take it easier and carefree solo, right up until the challenge mode is turned on. Now, when we consider leniency, is Warframe more lenient and forgiving solo? Absolutely not. At every stage of the game where leniency could even be a thing, it is entirely afforded to groups of players, not solo. The aforementioned arbitrations and Archimedia allow players in groups to be respawned. This does not happen solo. Acolytes and Steel Path missions will stick around until everyone has been downed. Solo, you are the squad, so mustn't go down at all or they despawn. In Relic Fishers, if you get a low value reward, you can swap to something higher value someone else's relic found. Unless you're solo. In solo missions, and especially boss fights, all focus is on you. There's no one else to take the heat for a moment, your tank and skill has to be on point throughout. Even in modding and gear selection, the demands of missions like Steel Path Interception or Archimedia missions mean you've got less wiggle room to have a viable loadout. When you have allies along, they can make it all so much more manageable. A group can cover control, buffs, tank and more far easier than a solo frame can manage. Warframe is definitely less forgiving solo. Now as far as suggestible and agreeable, Warframe isn't sentient. It can't really choose to go with the flow or stick its feet in the ground from moment to moment, as it's just a game, a program. But it does have a single mechanic which somewhat fits this bill: damage attenuation. Damage attenuation is the process by which enemies ramp up their damage reduction in response to you ramping up your damage output, harshly tapering off your actual damage applied. Typically speaking, the more players are in a squad, the more powerfully damage attenuation appears to kick in. In a sense, this is the game becoming more stubborn and refusing to let you get what you want, a dead enemy, the more people are trying to make it happen. It's a bit contrived, I'll admit, but it does play out in actual missions. A solo fight against the Isle Weaver bosses or Archimedia Legacite tends to be a lot easier, with the same gear, compared to running in a squad. The amount of time you need to spend applying damage comes down when solo. The game becomes more agreeable. It's easier about what you need to do to attain victory. In truth, Warframe is both easier and harder solo. It's less forgiving to play solo, challenges can be more intense, and your loadout has less room for error or inefficiency. Rewards are usually achieved more slowly solo, requiring more work for the same result. Outside of that, it allows you to take the game at your own pace, and your individual actions are more impactful than they are in a squad. Rarely, this may even make solo faster by design. Most of the time, however, in almost every definition, the game is easier in a squad of similarly skilled and paced players. If there's a mismatch in skills and expectations, it's less so the game making it harder as it is the players themselves. Which brings me to the final easy. Easy on the eyes. Warframe is a beautiful game. When you slow down and take a moment to smell the roses, you see just what rich and wonderful detail there is to this world. You can bask in the level design, the character design, the visual splendor of it all. Meanwhile, what your teammate hears is, it's a lovely morning in the Origin system, and you are a horrible goose. Yeah, let this be a reminder to turn on reduced teammate visual effects in your settings. Warframe is, by most definitions, easier in a group, unless the group decides to make it otherwise. That's all from me on this topic, so as always, squad up, bloom down, and fight well, Tenno.